Hello and welcome to Garibaldi Red, the Nottingham Forest podcast from Nottinghamshire Live, where I am joined by Sarah Clapson. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. We are here to discuss a really miserable defeat to Barnsley in the 94th minute, I think it was. Forest lost 1-0 and they needed a point to make the playoffs, and they did not play well. And now it's all on the line. Sarah, what on earth happened at Barnsley?
Oh, it was terrible. It was a really poor performance from start to finish, really. Forest were lacklustre. They never got going. They didn't create anything. I can't remember their goalkeeper having too many saves to make. They spent most of the match on the back foot, defending. And up until, 93 minutes, you thought, well, okay, they're going to manage to see out the point that they needed. And we can just move on, forget about this. And then, 94th minute, goal, added time, horrible scrappy goal to concede. Now we're left going into the final game, which is not what you want.
They were poor from the start again. They seemed to play very negatively in the sense of just trying to grind it out. What's going on in terms of these starts of the games? Do you think Lamucci's obviously trying to get them over the line, or that's how it appears? It doesn't seem to be working at all, does it?
No, I mean they've started slowly a lot this season. It's been a bit of a problem, and equally finishing's been a problem because they've conceded however many goals in injury time now. So it's kind of the bit in between. Sometimes has been all right either side. They've definitely got a few things that they need to iron out going into the playoffs. I think as much as the manager said afterwards that the formation didn't have a great effect, or he thought that there was other factors, or I think it's difficult to say that it didn't really, because they changed the system. They didn't look entirely comfortable with it. They had this kind of 3 or 5 man defence, depending on how whether they were attacking or defending, and they just looked a bit all over the shop, really. Defensively, they're not nervous, considering how many defenders they had on the pitch. They were just a bit edgy, and they just had nothing going forward. There was just no creativity. There was no kind of attacking outlet. The gap between the front, Lewis Grabban and Nuno da Costa and the midfielders was so big that Grabban and da Costa were having to drop back to try and get the ball and try and get involved, and they just never got going. They just didn't offer enough. Maybe they set up with the intention of thinking that a point was going to be good enough. That was what they needed, and thought, well, we'll rest some players and we'll tinker things around a little bit. And it didn't work, really. They're made to pay the price for a scrappy goal in injury time and just not being able to get the points that they needed.
Did Lamucci say what the thinking was with the formation of playing 3 at the back? Was that injury based, or what? Did he say anything about that post match?
He said it was. They had Joe Lolly, who wasn't fully fit. They had Amiobi, who said wasn't fully fit, and he was kind of obviously without Matty Cash. And he said it was just to accommodate the different scenarios, really. I think he's been really good tactically, Lamucci, throughout, and generally he has got it right, and he does see things during games, and he's not afraid to tweak things. He's not afraid to pull players off at half time or change the system at half time. And it was perhaps a bit surprising that he didn't do that yesterday, because at half time you could see that it wasn't working. You could see they were struggling. You could see that they weren't getting enough of the ball. They were struggling to string a few passes together, let alone create chances. And generally, he's quite spot on and quite savvy at that, and he's not afraid to change it. I was a little bit surprised, but I mean, given the options that they had on the bench, if Lolly's not fully fit, would you risk him? Would you bring him on? I don't think you would. Amiobi, he did, and he did add a bit more attacking intent. He did look bright, but they didn't have too many options, really, where you thought, well, he could come on and... It was just, for me, they were set up wrong. I think if you if you try and tinker too much, you always run the risk of it going wrong. And we've seen that before. And I think they just didn't set up right. They didn't look like they were going to go for the win. When you compared them to Barnsley, Barnsley were desperate for the win. They were going for it right from the first whistle. They were throwing everything at Forest. They looked like the side that were. Forest looked like they were on the beach. They looked like they didn't have anything to play for, which they do. That I think the manager said afterwards that he thought that his players didn't have the same desire and the same willingness to win as Barnsley, and I don't think you could question that. They want it for sure. That the players are desperate to get to the playoffs. You can tell that from speaking to them and from watching them out on the pitch. But whether it was nerves, whether it was just, I don't know what it was, but it was a really bad day. I think the one thing you can say is that, well, hopefully they've got that out of their system now, and if they make it to the playoffs, then they can't play as bad as that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this team has its strengths, but I don't think it's good enough to be outworked by anyone. If they're going to get promoted, then they've got to run further and harder and faster than anyone they meet in the playoffs. That's how they've got here, really, is discipline, tactical nous, those kind of factors that have just gone out the window the last few games at the wrong time. We are live on Facebook, so if you want to drop some comments in, we'll go through a few of those later, and questions. We'll come to those in a bit, actually. I just want to go to the injury situation first. The main one is obviously Bryce Samba. Lamucci said after the game that he's a doubt for Stoke, which to me means he's got to be a doubt for the playoffs. I'm not sure he was ever fully fit after the restart anyway, with the goal kicks thing and not quite looking his best. Just tell people what the situation with Samba is, and then we'll come on to Jordan Smith, Sarah.
I don't think it's a serious injury. I think it is just he is doubtful, and you wouldn't risk him. If that had been a playoff game yesterday, I think he would have played, whether he was 100% or not, because he's a big game player. He's the goalkeeper that you want. He's the first choice. I don't think they'll risk him on Wednesday, but I'd be amazed if he's not back for the playoffs, even if he's not fully 100% fit. And I think you can see, like, the last couple of games he has been struggling. We've seen him not taking all the goal kicks. He had a bit of treatment at times, but I think the big games, that's what they're saving him for. And Jordan Smith did. He was man of the match for me yesterday. He had a really good game. So I don't think there shouldn't be any concern if he ends up having to play against Stoke, as much as you'd want Samba there, because having that settled defence, having Samba and that back line that they've had for most of the season up until yesterday, really, that's really helped them. They've for the most part, they've been tough to beat. They've been solid, difficult to break down, and I think that has come a lot from consistency in having the same goalkeeper and the same defence. But why would you risk him? Why would you risk one of your players if you've got a good goalkeeper in Jordan Smith who can come in? I think that Smith will play on Wednesday, and then Samba will be back for the playoffs. Hopefully, you like to think he will be anyway.
Well, got to get in the playoffs, but yeah,
well,
they
yeah,
should do.
So, yeah.
They should do. We'll come on to that later. I mean, one thing about Jordan Smith is, he had that season where he played a lot of games, and he played in what was basically a playoff game against Ipswich to keep them in the league. And he had a brilliant game, and he made the save that perhaps changed the destiny of the club, arguably, in a sense, that kept them in the Championship before they went on and won that game. So, yeah, I don't think there should be any worries about him.
No.
He's not Bryce Samba, obviously. Bryce Samba's clearly number one. He saw off Aaron Muric. But Smith's a good number two to have, isn't he?
Absolutely. He was brilliant yesterday. He made Barnsley would have been, they could have been home and dry by half time if it wasn't for him. He pulled off some really good saves. He looked confident. He looked calm and composed for most part. It was harsh on him, I think, to concede right at the end. He deserved to keep a clean sheet because he kept his team in it, and he'd been brilliant. It was a real sucker punch for him, a real killer. And you could see how much it meant to him at the end, because he pretty much just collapsed on the floor straight away. He was devastated for it.
Just going to the comments then. Kevin Roebuck says the manager doesn't know how to set a team up for a win. I'm not sure that's right, particularly.
No.
Is it fair to say that he hasn't got it right in the last couple of games? Because obviously we give him a lot of praise for the things he has done. Is it fair to say that he got it wrong at Barnsley, the way they went about it?
Yeah, I think so. I think they looked like they were set up to get a draw, or they looked like they were content to get a draw. And for me, they should have been going for the win. They should have tried to get the 3 points, whether they just needed a point or not. You should have been trying to get the win. I'm sure they would. I'm not saying that they didn't want to win, but yeah, I think they were set up too defensively for me yesterday. They didn't have enough creative players on the pitch, and the system was just wrong. It didn't suit the players that they had. I don't think you could, and I think you have to say that's down to Lamucci, really. More often than not, he has got it right, but yesterday I don't think he did. I think he picked the wrong system. He tweaked it too much, and it didn't pay off.
I remember you said the other day, players get better when they're not playing, which I thought was a good line. Does Joe Lawley look a better player now because Forest aren't creating anything? And there were people he had his detractors earlier in the season because he wasn't at the level of last season, but it shows the value of him and Cash down the wing and just what a kind of creative force they are for Forest, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Lolly hasn't been at his best, or he hasn't been at the form he was last season, I should say. He's had his moments, and he's such a key player. Forest really need him fit for, well, hopefully for Wednesday, and then definitely for the playoffs, because he can create things. He's really key for them. Cash as well. Jenkinson has come in and done a good job. I think he's been pretty solid, but he doesn't get forward as much as Matty Cash. He doesn't offer that same kind of attacking outlet down the right. And yeah, Forest missed that yesterday. If they can get Cash and Lolly fit, if they can be at full strength, then Forest on their day can beat anybody. If they play to their strengths, if they have the first choice team out there, then there's no reason why they can't go into games and get results that they need. I think it's when they try to change things a little bit too much. When I don't want to say that the fringe players aren't stepping up, but if you're without big players like Lolly and Cash and Samba, then that's the crux of Forest team. That's the spine of Forest team. Without them, they're going to struggle. Any team would struggle, I think, because they're such big players.
Calvin Orley says it's not the manager's fault they've conceded a goal in the last 5 minutes consistently since we've started again, which is true. Why does that keep happening, do we think? I mean, it must be in their heads by now, mustn't it, that they're going in stuff time? Yeah,
I think it must be by now. Once you've conceded a few, then you further down the line you're thinking, oh gosh, we're into added time. This has happened before. It starts to play on your mind. It's bound to, because you've experienced it so many times. Such a large part of football is mentality and what goes on in the head, and it's obviously starting to play on them now, and it's something they're going to have to put right. It's that kind of game management. It's seeing games out. It's making sure that you play to the final whistle, and that should be a given. But equally, I think Forest, too many times they've not killed games off. It's not always just about conceding in the last minute. It's not killing games off before that. It's not getting the goals they need to be home and dry, to have the points in the bag. They need to make sure they do that. They need to make sure that they're ruthless and that they take chances, and that, well, certainly they create more than they did yesterday, because they can only think of two, really. And they were Lewis Graben's one early on, and then Nuno da Costa's back-heeled flick. I can't think of any other times where you thought, oh, Forest are in here, they might get something. That was pretty much it. Whereas Barnsley, gosh, you could list countless times they hit the bar. Jordan Smith may save after save after save. And if you want to get 3 points, or if you want to get a draw, then you need to be scoring goals.
Before we look at Stoke then on Wednesday and the permutations around that, just what's the injury situation with Cash, Lolly and Samba Sow, who did play? Are you expecting them to be back for Stoke or the playoffs?
I don't know about Stoke. I would say again, similar to Brice Samba, it's whether you risk them or not. I mean, there's an argument for playing them, certainly, so that you've got the team trying to build a little bit of momentum, albeit it's only one game. Lolly, for me, last week when he came off the bench, he didn't look 100%. Lamucci said pretty much that he was struggling. He was obviously still struggling yesterday because he didn't come on. A bit more rest might help him. Cash wasn't in the squad yesterday, but I would think he'll be, I don't know, maybe not for Stoke, but you'd hope for the playoffs. I think that hopefully Forest will want to have a full strength team if and when they get to the playoffs, and whether it's right to risk players or not now, it's obviously what they've decided not to do. They've decided to give players a break, or players who are kind of 50-50, they've decided not to include them. Whether that's the right call, I don't know. I guess you could see it from both sides of the argument, really.
When you look at the league table, then obviously Forest needed a point to get in the playoffs at Barnsley. They still need a point mathematically. There is that goal difference swing that means they've sort of still got 1 foot in the playoffs. They need to lose probably by a couple of goals and have Swansea win by a few goals. The fixtures on Wednesday are Reading v Swansea, Cardiff v Hull, and Forest v Stoke. So you've got Reading are, in theory, on the beach already for a very short time before they come back for pre-season. Hull are absolutely useless and should be beaten out of sight by Cardiff. And Stoke are kind of in the same position as Reading, but Michael O'Neill doesn't strike me as the manager who's going to let his players go through the motions, and they've got a bit to play for in terms of impressing him for next season. So it's certainly not an easy game, is it, Sarah, against Stoke?
No. I mean, if Forest aren't focused, if they aren't on it, then there's absolutely the potential for things to go wrong on Wednesday. The Championship this season has been crazy. There's been so many up and down, topsy-turvy results. There's a lot of scenarios that have come right down to the wire, and you wouldn't want to rely on somebody else. Forest need to look after themselves. They need to get the point or the points that they need, take care of their own position, forget about what happens elsewhere, get it done, and then look forward, put what's happened behind you, start again for the playoffs, go again, clean start, one-off games. Yeah. I just hope they play better than they did yesterday, because you want to go into, assuming that they get to first, you want to go into them in a good frame of mind and in a good place, and I don't think they were at the final whistle yesterday. She said the dressing room was, he said it was a horrible place. It was terrible. The atmosphere was not good. The players were down. He's got to lift them now. He's got to pick them back up quickly, because they can't dwell on it. They can't let that play on their minds when they go out on the City ground on Wednesday. They've got to put in a good performance, take care of their own position, and then go again for the playoffs. And we said before, in the playoffs, anything can happen. It's such a lottery. If you play well on the day, then you're in with a chance. And you can look at the form that Forest have been in and say that, the people might think they'll struggle, but one-off games, they've got as good a chance of anybody. And if they set up right, if they have players that perform to their best, if they play like they know they can play, and we've seen it so many times this season. I know there's been, you can point to games where they've struggled, where they've not been great, where the football's been pretty dire, but equally there's been games where they've played wrong, where they've played right, where they've played good football, where they've scored nice goals, where they've put nice moves together. They are capable of it. They just need to show it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Forest 4 times in the playoffs, and it's been brutal every time. They should have won.
I'm trying to be optimistic.
Well, my point to be optimistic is they should have won all those games. They should have beat Sheffield United, we know. Yeovil was just a nightmare. Blackpool, Swansea, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter if you should win those games. I mean, on paper, Forest should lose the playoffs now, but I feel that they could just go out and win them still, because if Lamucci gets it right, if the team gets it right on the day, they're very good against the best team. So I don't think we should be completely down and out. I just would like them to go at Stoke and not be negative and not play for a point. And Forest are better than Stoke this season if they perform. So I really hope that they go out. But this is where the Moochie earns his money, isn't it? Andy Reid was on 5 Live the other day saying managers make the difference in the playoffs. Well, the Moochie's got to, show what he can do again this season, having already transformed the club or the team. This is a big chance for him to show what a good manager he is, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He's proved it already. He's got them to where they are, and they've got where they are because the style of football, all right, maybe it's not attractive to watch all the time, but it's effective. It gets points, and that's got them up the table. That's what's counted. So, yeah, you're right. It is where he comes into his own. We've heard from a few of the players saying that he's great at these pre-match team talks, great at his half-time team talks, and he's going to have to dig one out of the bag on Wednesday for sure. And he's got to get the players lifted. He's got to get them in the right frame of mind, because I don't think you can go out there on Wednesday and think, well, we just need a point, we'll just play for a draw. They tried that on Sunday, it didn't work. You're going to have to go out there, play for the win, play for the 3 points, play like you're in the final. That's what they've called it. They've called it a final. Play like you're fighting to win something, which they are. They're fighting to get in the playoffs. I think that it would serve them well if they go out and put in a really good performance and make it easy for themselves and make it easy for everybody else watching, because we don't want to go into the last few minutes on Wednesday thinking, oh, crikey, it's 0-0. What's going to happen here? Thinking about what's happening elsewhere. Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want any nerves. A nice, easy performance would certainly help.
Let's go through a couple more comments quickly. Lisa Hascard, love to see Mighton start on Wednesday. That's a big ask of a young lad, but he has looked quite bright when he's come off the bench, hasn't he?
He has. He's done really well. He offers them something, and he's looked lively. He's been willing to run. He's been willing to, come on and pitch in. But that would be a big call, I think, to start him on Wednesday. It's a big game. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot to ask of a young player that is still trying to break through into the team. He's still trying to make his way in. That's a lot of weight to put on young shoulders. And I'm not saying that he couldn't cope with it, but I think it would be, it would be a big ask for him.
James McCready, for playoffs, do you go defensive or change it and go attacking? I think you just have to play the way that has got you to where you are. And Forest seem to me to have just gone away from that the last few games. If they, they're not a team that's going to have 50% of the ball, even never mind 60 or 70, but they've lost that counter-attacking kind of swagger that even they had like when they came back at Sheffield Wednesday and at Derby. So I think they just need to actually find themselves again rather than worry too much about going all out or being too defensive. Where else? Lots of Carvalho comments. Sarah, I'll just ask you really quickly. Carvalho is not going to feature heavily at the moment, is he, Dion? Based on what we've seen, if you could just give us a short comment on all the Carvalho comments that are coming in.
No, he wasn't even in the squad yesterday. Lemici said he's not. He doesn't want to. When he's been asked about it, he said, I don't want to talk about individual players. And for me, that says a lot. He's not been playing much this season, so he's not going to suddenly come in now and be a first choice player. He clearly doesn't fit in the way that Lemici wants to play and the way that he sets up the team. And that's no reflection on João Carvalho, because I think he's a really talented player. It's just that he doesn't fit in, and that's not going to change in the next few games. You're not going to see him all of a sudden pop up in the playoffs, I don't think, because he's barely featured this season. He might be on the bench, but even when he's been on the bench, he's not, he's struggled to get game time. I think it's easy to forget that he hasn't shown the kind of form that we all know he can show this season. And like we mentioned before, when you're not playing, I think sometimes you do become a better player. He is really talented. He's got bags and bags of quality, but this year he's not really shown it. And that's why he's not in the squad. That's not why he's getting game time. If he'd been at his best, if he'd been able to put the kind of performances in and show the skills that we all know he's got, then he'd be playing. But he's not managed to do that.
Yeah, and there's no point you asking Lamouchi about it game after game after game, because managers don't like those questions, because what are you going to say?
I think we'd get the same response every time, and eventually we'd get no response. So.
No, but every time we do these things, we get so many Carvalho questions. So Will Jones, true. Will Jones, Lamouchi's made some selection mistakes, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. The time is now to get things right, play our best team, best formation, play our own game to get us where we are, and trust in it. I think that's right. That's a good sentiment. Yeah, for sure. Right, let's just start to wind things up looking at Stoke. Give us your prediction. I said Forest would beat Barnsley 3-0, so I might as well not say anything this time.
Yeah, I did actually think they would. I predicted a defeat on Sunday. I was hoping I was going to be proved wrong, but yeah. So Wednesday, I'm going to go for a win. I think that they've got so much. They've got a massive point to prove now, and they'll want to do it. I'm hoping that they're going to be really fired up, and that they've got this bad performance out the way, and they've got that out of their system, and they'll go out there and play their own game, play like they know they can play what's got them to where they are now, and get a good win under their belts. And I think they're going to do it. I do. I think I'll go 2-0.
Yeah, I think that's the big sentiment for sure. You can't approach it like they did at Barnsley. I think if they go about it like they did against like Birmingham at home or someone like that, those kind of games, I think they definitely can beat Stoke. And then, like I said earlier, I still think they can get promoted via the playoffs. Just got to get there first, but still got one foot in there. Just
it's got 1.5 feet in there, I think.
Yeah, there's just a bit of mud under the boots and it's a bit slippery.
Yeah,
so it'd be good to get on some solid ground. Right, thank you everyone for the comments, for joining us today, and thank you, Sarah, for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, you don't start your shift till later, so I do appreciate you stepping into the breach.
Anything to read.
We shall be back. We shall be back on Thursday to hopefully look ahead to a playoff semi-final. I'll be gutted if they can't, if they're not, but they really should be. So let's hope they go out and beat Stoke, and we're all feeling a bit more optimistic. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, and we will catch you soon.
Thank you.